Okay, so let's dive into today's questions. First up from Dan Lamshed. I don't know whether he has a Lamshed or whether his surname is Lamshed, but either way, his question is, what are your go-to reads, fiction and or non-fiction? So, fiction, I have read, had read Lord of the Rings cover to cover, 1, 2 and 3, 7 times before I was 17, just because I absolutely loved them. I was a proper nose for Lord of the Rings, and I still very much am. And then I ended up reading it a couple more times around my dissertation in third year at university, and have also read everything else within Tolkien's ecosystem, which means that I'm fairly up to speed with all of that, and that's kind of my go-to fiction. Whenever I feel like I want to pick up a fiction book, I'll kind of just instinctively read Lord of the Rings, which is maybe a protective mechanism. Maybe that's me being too comfortable. Maybe I should branch out a bit more, but generally I read more non-fiction these days, and I'm currently reading, is it in this room? No, it's not, it's gone downstairs, but Buy Back Your Time, which I am one chapter in, and for the life of me have forgotten who actually wrote it, so I am just going to bring that up now. By Dan Martell. So, Buy Back Your Time, Get Unstuck, Reclaim Your Freedom, and Build Your Empire is what the book is called, and it's effectively about time management and how to streamline your day-to-day existence as an individual, which is something I am constantly struggling with. Next up, The Bunsen Runner. Not The Bunsen Burner, in fact, The Bunsen Runner. Do you feel pressure to keep up extreme challenges due to the overall brand created? Yes and no. So, yes, because obviously it's a core component of what I do, and therefore those that have come this far will have an element of an expectation that that's what we will continue to do. But I do think, fortunately, my audience, quote unquote, has a very good understanding of some of the more nuanced considerations with everything going on in our ecosystem, in that I'm not just sort of an athlete full-time. I train around running the businesses in sort of the same hours that anybody else with a full-time job would do. And I don't need to do that, but that's kind of how I find myself operating best. But it does mean that there's a balancing act to be found, and that means that I can't just do one extreme thing after the next and just keep rolling and rolling and rolling. From a health point of view, it's probably not wise. From a longevity point of view, it's not wise. I've got many years left in me yet, so it's something that I'm conscious of drip feeding rather than going too hard too soon and then not being able to go hard at all. So there is an element of pressure because I kind of feel like I want to keep moving things forwards, and sometimes I kind of want to remind people of my ability whenever I have done a few videos on YouTube that I feel are a bit more informative, a bit more, could be anyone saying it, it's just me giving the information. And maybe that's a bit of an ego thing, but I think it's just more from a credibility point of view. I like to for myself as much as anyone else, sort of pull these creative ideas together and sort of make them happen and document the training process. And it's just, social media is a beast, essentially, which means that there's new people arriving every day for different reasons. And I put a lot of effort and a lot of time and a lot of sweat, blood and tears into the athletic side of things. So it is great, given the investment and the time that we put into documenting that, for it to be seen by all of those new people that arrive at the YouTube channel, the podcast, everything else. So yes, there's an element of external pressure. Yes, there's an element of internal pressure, because I definitely feel like there's a scale to this I'm trying to manage. But I am currently at a point in my life where I'm really quite existentially reflecting on this question and what it looks like in the long term. I don't quite have the answers yet, but if you stick around and make sure that you've hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening on, then you will find out in due course. So hopefully that covers that. There'll be a few more questions like that as we go, but I will be doing a YouTube video update on everything going on with all the change going on in the businesses, personally, what I'm training for, what I see the future looking like very, very soon. Question from Jess Malley. Have you ever struggled with disordered eating or your outlook towards food in general? Yes, I have actually. I had orthorexia nervosa in my last year at school. That is self-diagnosed, as it wasn't really a thing that was spoken about. It wasn't really a term that was known, because obviously bulimia and anorexia are the ones that are much more common. Orthorexia kind of manifests in a slightly different way that isn't as visibly, arguably damaging, quote unquote. So I went through a period where I would only eat certain foods. I carried a little pocket scale in my school uniform. to go to lunch, that when food was served, I would sort of weigh certain components of it to stick with my macros, bro. And it got to the point where I wasn't drinking for 6 months as a teenager in Scotland, which is very, very strange at that period of time anyway. And I'd not go to social occasions, I'd not go to family dinners and things, because I only eat these foods, therefore I cannot go, or therefore I cannot eat there, so I'll eat beforehand and kind of show up at the end, say hello to everyone. And the only reason I got out of that actually was because it was an obsession with clean eating, basically. So orthorexia is kind of you create an ideological set of thinking around food, and then you force yourself to stay within those parameters to the point where it becomes restrictive. And that's where I found myself. I was obsessed with clean eating, quote unquote, whilst also tracking and weighing everything that I ate, which I still do, but I have a very healthy relationship with now because it's much more flexible and there's no good or bad foods. Whereas back then there were bad foods in my mind. And it took me going on holiday to Mexico, where I didn't have access to anything other than what was being served to us on a daily basis. And the Nutella pancakes that I had one morning that I ate and didn't immediately become not jacked meant that I could then start to work in some flexibility, and over time became a lot more aware of the fact that from a performance point of view, yes, there are good foods and yes, there are bad foods in terms of how you metabolize them and use them as fuel. But inherently, when it comes to body composition, it is a case of calories in versus calories out. When it comes to health, it's about making sensible decisions and focusing on foods that are nutrient dense and managing your micronutrition. And when it comes to my relationship with it, I enjoy eating food within the parameters that my current goals focus on, and that often tends to be quite a lot of food. So I get to eat a lot of what I enjoy. I eat a lot of things quite habitually. There's lots of things I've been eating for 10 years straight, at least, every single day. And I will probably continue to do so, but I kind of found myself accidentally coming out the back end of orthorexia nervosa because I had the choice taken away from me. So I don't want to make it seem like it was that big a deal, but reflecting back on it then, I definitely did fall into that sort of trap with a form of disordered eating. I don't fall into it at all anymore. I don't have any of those thoughts, really. I'm very confident and comfortable with managing my nutrition from a tracking daily intake, using it for performance point of view now. There's no inkling of my mindset that ever struggles with that anymore, and I think that's just having been experimenting and exploring that space for so long, essentially. So hopefully that answers your question. Do you have any thoughts on AI and how it will change society? From Breen_frown. Not really, no. I mean, if you open up LinkedIn, then all you get are thoughts about AI. But I've been on ChatGPT, I've dicked around with it. Yeah, cool. It doesn't really affect anything that I'm focusing on at the moment. And actually, if you start thinking too much about it, it becomes quite existentially draining. There might be people thinking, oh, he's not paying attention to AI, sink or swim, bro, you're going to fall behind. But at the end of the day, there will always be a market for human beings and the service provided and human interaction. And if there is a world where that is no longer the case, then we'll all be pretty miserable anyway, I expect. So you will not be able to laugh then, my friend. But in my industries, in my focus points, it's not really something that I'm too concerned about from a commercial point of view. It's not something I'm particularly drawn to from an interest point of view. And I just don't really have the time to sort of deep dive and pretend that I really know what I'm talking about to even warrant having an opinion. So the short answer is no, but I definitely think it will change society. How is not up to me. So watch this space, one and all, I believe. Question from Cole. 2 questions from Colin Cambro, actually. Well, that's not his name's not Colin Cambro, it's Colin Campbell, and he runs Cambro Conversations, a podcast I've been on recently, and you can go and listen to if you would like to do so. So the first question from him is, what role did the long drive play in you being so reflective when we last spoke? Is there a lesson in that? Yes, there is, Cole. Great question. So I drove from Edinburgh to Glasgow to record with Cole a month ago, maybe. If you want to listen to the podcast, please do. It's a very, very open, honest, reflective me. Probably the most there ever has been on any podcast, so check that out if you're interested. But most importantly, it came at a time, I'm still in this time where there's a lot of really positive change happening within the businesses, within my day-to-day, within the things I'm wanting to focus on long-term. And the stress of spinning all of those plates balanced with a desire to move everything forwards, balanced with the fact that I enjoy everything that I do, balanced with the fact that I do need to take my foot off the gas sometimes, balanced with the existential concern over whether I'm making the right decisions, whether I'm investing money in the right ways, whether I'm allocating my time in the best ways possible, whether I could do this better, that better, these constant questions that come with existing in the way that I do, and some of you listening will, I'm sure. And the drive to Glasgow is about an hour. And in that hour, I just found my mind wandering and really thinking about, not the questions Cole would ask me, but just thinking about the questions I've been asking myself. And then after that drive, I sat down with Cole. He gave me my second Monster Ultra of the day, which sent me off. So I was talking very quickly on this podcast. And it became quite cathartic for me. So I think the lesson there is essentially, if you find opportunities for your mind to wander and you to be very reflective, it might be a really good thing to then sit down with somebody at the end of it and just talk it out. Whether that's in person, whether that's on the phone, whether it's into a diary or a journal. I have a iPhone notes section on my phone where I scribble down business ideas or general thoughts I've had the second I get through the door after runs or bike rides. And that is about 4 years long at the moment. It's pretty comprehensive. And I think long drives do that for me, long runs do that for me, long bike rides do that for me. And if I calibrate on those thoughts at the end with somebody else, then there's a really valuable exchange. And you can actually listen to that exchange if you so desire. Second question is, how do you make your brand partnership decisions? Great question in this space. Something that's becoming more and more prominent, I think, in terms of people wanting to understand it. The bottom line is I spend a lot more on my social media production than people my size of social media following probably would. That's one, due to the practicality of filming things in the way that we do. Two, a real passion for documenting these things and bringing them to life and for the craft itself. And three, to help me better manage my time. So that means that I'm only really generally looking for long-term partnerships with brands that I have a great relationship with, which is obviously first and foremost with the product, but then secondly with the people behind it and the sort of the way that they view the value in the partnership, because I try and not make things too transactional. It's much more of a how can we get creative and bring stories to life, bring activations to life, bring communities to life, and sort of do the more fun stuff around the edges that actually gets conversations going, gets people trying new things, and means that I feel like I'm really contributing to that relationship. So people will be able to see and have been able to see the sort of long-term relationships I have with several brands over the years. They're in my Instagram bio. And then there's relationships on the podcast, which you'll have already heard some today. There'll be another one in about 15 minutes time. And they're all with brands that I get on really well with. I use and love the products. I would never do anything with a brand that I don't use and love the product. There's some things that maybe aren't as relevant for the majority of the audience, but I still love it, so I give it a go on a one-off basis, but I generally don't really do that. I like building things. I like conversing with people that also like building things, which is why if somebody said to me, here's a brand that you kind of know about, kind of fits your corner of the industry, we'll give you this amount of money to post this, here's the brief, we'll do it once and we'll pay you this. It's kind of like, no, that doesn't feel exciting. That's too transactional. I like the process of making things happen. I like the people behind them. I like the stories of businesses. I like the mission, the community, and everything around the fringes because it fascinates me and it always has. And if I feel like I'm contributing to a business and I can actually put my stamp on it and really bring the uniqueness of what I do from an athletic point of view, from a podcast like this one point of view, then I get excited about it. What I don't get excited about is the standard quote-unquote influencer culture that I think can get people quite cynical. So value first from a relationship and authenticity point of view, and then all of the minor details follow from there, basically. So hopefully that makes sense, and moves into our question from Charlie_Alvey. Why did you do theology/philosophy at university? So it was actually just theology. It was my degrees in theology and religion. It's just behind me somewhere, I think. I don't know. Erin's reshuffled my office recently, so it's in here. It's behind me. And for those listening, just imagine a degree. Yes? Okay, cool. So the short answer is to improve my chances of getting into Oxford. So I wanted to do English literature at Oxford, at Keble College. I was then advised that Keble is highly oversubscribed, so I applied for theology and religion at... No, I was going to apply for English at Keble, and then I was told, actually, look at the data and statistics on English literature applications, which was about 2,900 places to 1, and then even with that, you're then fighting for a place within a college. So I was then going to apply for English literature at Worcester College, and then I actually saw that the odds didn't really improve much. And then I saw that the odds for theology and religion were about 67 to 1, so I chose to improve my odds. I didn't get in. I got to interview stage and didn't get past that, and ended up going to Durham to study a degree that I hadn't necessarily chosen to do. So I essentially rolled the dice and lost, to be quite honest. But that is unfortunately the game that has to be played in the education system all over the world. But I was hell-bent on going to Oxford to study whatever I could, and chose to compromise on the subject I was most passionate about to try and get my foot in the door. I sort of saw through the door, but never managed to break it open. So ended up at Durham to study theology and religion, and it was a subject I did enjoy, don't get me wrong, but the actual subject matter of the university course itself was more focused on the philosophy of religion, which is essentially just a academic dick measuring contest in terms of who can say the most convoluted thing to make a very simple point more complex. And a lot of them were saying the same thing anyway. I was more interested in the sort of biblical history side of things, the cultural influence of religion all over the world, the sort of sociological impact and everything that goes with it, but we didn't really focus on that, which meant that I didn't really enjoy most of my degree. I did enjoy my dissertation, which was on the theology of Tolkien's literature, and that was what I really felt I got from my degree, was putting my stamp on that. And I did come close to ruining Tolkien's ecosystem by studying it. So there's a lesson there in terms of keeping your passions and interests potentially separate from formal relationships, or something that was worded horribly, but you know what I mean. So, Charlie, the short answer is I chose to do theology or philosophy at university to improve my chances at getting into the best university I could, not because it was necessarily what I wanted to study. So, another question from another Charlie. Charlie_Gavs. Do you still receive therapy / talk to a therapist? I do not. I feel self-aware enough from the time I have spent in therapy and the work that I've done myself and the time I've spent reflecting in a bubble of a head torch at 3 a.m, etc., that my toolbox is well equipped enough for me to manage things in-house now. And that's not me saying that, I have all the knowledge that a therapist or a psychologist does. No, but more that they have equipped me with the toolbox so that I know I can rely on the support network around me and myself to make decisions that are in the best interest of my mental health on a day-to-day basis. That's not to say I'm perfect in terms of doing it. There's still things I do that are not good. I'm on 4.5 hours of sleep today, for example, because I ended up training really late last night and then did a bit of work before bed and then got up at 5 this morning to catch up on work before going to the Pentlands with Johnny. And that's not something on paper I'd say is good for my mental health, but I did it anyway. And there'll be times that I'll say I'll have 2 pints and maybe have 6 pints and then think, you feel a bit groggy today, you shouldn't have done that. But that's just human. And what my toolbox allows me to do is not catastrophize when those things happen or when I feel like I've let myself down, but rather to take action and move things forwards. And I think that's what we are all uniquely blessed to be able to do, is to work with people, support networks, professionals, to be able to establish what our toolbox looks like, what our support network looks like, so that we can better manage our mental health on a day-to-day basis. It's not the be-all and end-all. There's obviously a place for third-party specific help and support. But I think as a nation, as individuals, we can do a better job of managing things at our end by just being more conscious of our behaviour patterns and the decisions we make on a day-to-day basis at a micro and a macro level, so that we are giving ourselves the best chance of being the person that we want to be. That was quite profound in the end, wasn't it? So there we are. Question from Wes. Do you think you can be competitive at cycling, long-distance trail running and high rocks at the same time? I do not, because to be competitive, quoting, I assume you mean winning, or at least doing very well. To be competitive at cycling, you need to be on the bike all the time. You need to weigh next to nothing. And in weighing next to nothing, you are not going to be able to push a 175 kg sled as well as everybody else that's doing high rocks as their only focus point. So they're not incompatible, the three of them. We obviously, at Omni Performance, and as an athlete myself, firmly believe that you can do all three of those things and be good at them and make progress. But with hybrid training and with balancing concurrent disciplines, you need to accept at the kickoff that you are compromising and making certain sacrifices. But if those sacrifices are fulfilling for you and you like to make progress and do different things, then that's fantastic. However, if Usain Bolt said, I want to be the fastest 100-meter sprinter of all time and deadlift 600 pounds, then he's probably not going to be the fastest 100-meter sprinter of all time. So specificity is king when it comes to your best performance possible in any one discipline. I think that combination of cycling, long-distance trail running, and high rocks is too diluted for you to be quote-unquote competitive. But in my mind, competitiveness in disciplines is against yourself. So if that's what you're asking, then yeah, crack on, my man. Progress will come, and you can be competitive with yourself and be your own hero. One of my favourite phrases of all time. Okay, so question from Andrew Bowler _06. How do you know when to push your body to its limits without risk of injury? Good question. It's a skill, and that comes from exposure to both of those things, the risk of injury and its limits. So I, fortunately, have been quite injury-free for most of my life. I've broken my elbow. I've had some sort of knee issues. I've had a hernia or two. What else have I had? Multiple concussions. That was a pretty rough period of my life, actually. Broken a finger. Broken my arm a couple times. Yeah, I didn't really come prepared with a list. I apologise. But nonetheless, when I've been training as I present myself online for the past 5 years, I've been pretty non-injury prone, which is cool. Along the way, I've very much found my limits in some things, but I've also known when a niggle's a little bit something more. And I think the only way you're gonna figure that out is by training and working hard and sort of learning to feel what's just a bit of a grind or a bit of a stiffness on the day versus what is an actual pain and something you should worry about. So generally speaking, if anything pings or you feel a sort of sudden moment of something when it comes to muscles, that generally indicates that something has happened, which is obviously more on the side of injury. If you just feel a sort of dull pain progressing over time, that could well just be fatigue. But again, I'm speaking quite arbitrarily here because it depends on what you're doing, your skill level, how long you've been doing it. But the bottom line is, don't assume that anything painful is immediately an injury, because it's not always the case. This is not medical advice. I think it goes without saying. But for example, on Sunday, my legs absolutely did not show up on my long run. They just didn't show up. And I was 45 minutes in and I just sort of knew that wasn't the case, but there was the stubbornness in me that thought, well, you've got 3 hours at 145 heart rate in, so just crack on. But the stress of the week, lots of things going on, not enough sleep last week, too many hours at my desk, too many hours working, missed a few training sessions as a result of that, just because I absolutely had to. I very, very rarely miss training sessions, but it was either miss the training session or get less than 6 hours of sleep, and I chose sleep last week. So Sunday, it just caught up with me, and from a psychological point of view and from a physical point of view, I knew that pushing beyond that would be diminishing returns in both those things. So the question is essentially, when are you quitting and when are you making a sensible decision, I think, in some ways. And I think that's only something that you can determine for yourself by sort of going through the motions of experiencing both those things. And that's not me suggesting go out and get injured, but it's me saying push yourself hard, approach with caution if you feel any sort of lingering pain. If there's any sort of aggressive pain, then obviously just avoid anything that's aggravating it in any way. But most importantly, don't take any of this as medical advice. And if you are worried about injury at the moment, see a physiotherapist. Don't ask a stranger on the internet for his opinions in a podcast Q&A. So I'm going to stop that there before I incriminate myself by giving too much advice on that topic, but hopefully that helps. So, favourite way to switch off? Question from JJ Hartikainen. At the moment, it is driving around the back roads near my house on a nice day. However, I do not get to control when the nice days are, but I just find sort of no music, country roads, take me home, has been very useful. Alongside that, walking the dogs with Erin is great. And I've actually found quite recently that booking things in advance and looking forward to them so that I can essentially work around putting myself in a headspace where I can not need to worry or kind of buy myself the time to just be stress-free for a couple of hours means that when I really do just not need to worry about any of the emails or things on my phone that I need to get to, I can just enjoy it. So recently, Erin and I went for Sunday lunch and shooting somewhere, and I knew that was coming for a while, so I kind of just worked around that day where I could just completely ignore my phone, and it meant that I just really enjoyed that experience and felt very present. But I do need to get better, and that's why I'm reading the book that I'm reading at the moment on general switch off, because I have a lot of time devoted to a lot of different things, which makes it very hard for me to switch off. My personality doesn't really lend itself to switching off all that well, so it's something that I'm working on so I can find the moments of peace and the moments of presence every single day rather than just once or twice a week, because the fact that I'm recording this on the day that I'm recording it, thinking back to 3, 4, 5 days ago when that thing happened, is mind-blowing to me. So something that I'm working on. Feeding quite nicely into the next question from Patrick Green. Most challenging thing about being an online coach is, from a one-to-one point of view, is having those people that are sort of relying on you on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, because it means you're kind of always thinking about what's going on. You're always somewhat on call to some degree, and it's up to you to manage the time to be able to effectively look after those people, which means that it's not just a case of close the laptop and that's it, work's done for the day. You'll have people trickling things through. So I bought a work phone specifically for that purpose. I'm reading questions off my personal phone and I'm looking at my work phone behind the monitor that I'm recording this on. And that's a good way for me to sort of set personal boundaries at my end, but there's always that sort of in the back of my mind, there are X amount of people that are essentially depending on me for X service, which means that it's difficult to sort of flick the on and an off switch when it comes to work. And that's not unique to online coaching, but any service-based, retained sort of business focus, that's definitely something to consider. And it's down to the individual to create the boundaries that allow for that to be effective. I've had to tell some athletes in the past, look, I'm not going to check my work phone at the weekends. And once I've explained that I've got those boundaries, I've got those rules, people are fine. But I think some people go into the expectation that it's kind of just, I'm sitting ready, waiting on my phone to get back to them straight away, which isn't the case. That would be an impractical way to do things. So I think I need to establish clear boundaries at my end and then effectively communicate those so that there is an understanding with those that are receiving said service. So that feeds a little bit into the considerations I have at the moment of trying to set clearer boundaries in general terms and be more present and better at switching off. So I think those two questions roll quite nicely into one another. Question from Garush6 or Garush6. Best mental tip to push through a difficult session is make sure you have a good reason why you're doing that session in the first place. So for me, it's always been self-improvement. It's always been having a very clear goal at the end of it. It's always been having a community around me that sort of bought in, or there's a clear direction that we're moving in. If I was just arbitrarily training and had an absolute hellfire of a session, then my mentality wouldn't be as strong to get through it. But I've always had a really clear reason why, and I think that's very important. I think people too often just think, I'm going to train like a savage with no intent. And then when it gets really tough, the easier thing to do is just sort of scale it back a little bit because the reason why isn't strong enough. So yeah, the best mental tip I have is to have a strong enough reason why, and you'll always push through. You'll take away the option to quit and refine that over time. And that means that you can then develop the skill of knowing when it's right to take your foot off the gas rather than having it to the floor, because you've kind of trained the quit out of you, which sounds like a very motivational speaker in Miami sort of thing to say, but I've said it, okay? So moving on to question from Spudtopia. How do you feel about the idea that a quote-unquote athlete is defined by participation in competition? I disagree. I think an athlete is anyone that trains for a specific goal, task. Ironman age group athletes. He's saying they're not athletes because, yes, they're in competition, but they're not pros. It's wishy-washy definition. Anyone that trains with commitment towards a specific training goal, in my mind, is an athlete. And I've seen a lot of gatekeeping about that term recently online, and frankly, I'm not interested in it. So I mean absolutely no offence, Spartatopia, by taking such a tone, but if that is your opinion, then I firmly disagree. If you're just asking for my thoughts, then I believe that an athlete is anyone that trains with specific intent towards a specific goal in a specific discipline. And there's a lot of them out there. So that is that. Question from Running Dory. Chimsy, first name, I believe. If your family had a Netflix series, what would it be called? The Chronicles of the Fat Children Who Stole All the Ben and Jerry's from the Freezer. That sounds about right. Cool. Next question. I joke. But if my mum is listening, she will be laughing, thinking, God, every time Jamie and Fergus come home, the fridge just gets decimated, pillaged. It's like a ship of Vikings has come in and found the cured meat storage. At this point, it's worth mentioning as well, I'm not nearly as bad as my brother is. When he goes home, he's like a bloody, I don't know, hamster. Do they store things in their cheeks and then save them for later? I swear that's what he does, because you blink and the fridge is empty. I joke. I think it'd be called something along the lines of Crawley Chaos, because all of us at the moment have a lot going on, all in completely different spheres, and it's kind of pillar to post for all involved at the moment, and it's often quite laughable because we tend to just be phoning each other with complaints about things that none of us really understand, but it's just nice to have somebody on the other end of the phone to listen to those complaints. So with my parents, it's with their business and all the considerations around that. With my brother, it's with his cricket and the early stage of his career. He's actually joining my businesses to help with things which I'm excited about, as he has a mean work ethic. He's actually editing this podcast. So Jamie, I'm hoping you've not made any mistakes. Otherwise, everybody knows now. So bear that in mind. And then from my end, it's just the businesses as well. So we're all very much pillar to post, and it is quite chaotic at the moment. And because of the alliteration of Crawley Chaos, I think that is what the Netflix series would be called. Question from Matthew McClure, 11. Do you drink? If so, how closely do you manage it? I do drink. I will have a glass of wine or a couple of beers on a Saturday with Erin or a friend or whatever. Once, twice a month, max. I will get it wrong and go into a drinking session without any numbers to share, I'm afraid, in terms of quantity. It just all parameters go out the window. Once a quarter, but actually it's been almost 6 months since I last really sort of heavily drank. So maybe in 2023 it's become once every 6 months. Who knows? We will see. But I tend to reserve that for sort of big social occasions where I feel that the drinking is almost justified. Sort of the fun of the experience is justified enough to make the compromise on sleep, recovery, cognitive ability for the next day or two worth it in my mind. But the midweek drinks that make me feel a bit groggy on a work day when I've got so much going on, training-wise, work-wise, etc., are no longer worth it for me. That's not to say that it's a bad thing, but it's just a case of I kind of look at things very almost for the value of them. So I don't really get anything from a minor social interaction with a beer or two other than reduced quality of sleep, the lack of ability to drive myself home, and some dehydration the following day, so I can have that social interaction without the drinks. And that's where, actually, conveniently, Days Brewing come in as a very suitable alternative that I have on a week-to-week basis. I pretty much have one every night with my dinner now, in the fridge, cold, lager or pale ale, depending on what I'm pairing my meal with. And it has all of the ceremony of a beer without any of the negative effects. I'll have a few at the weekend as well, depending on how I'm feeling. They're just nice to drink. They're refreshing. I keep them cold. I've always got them stocked. And it means that whenever I get the urge for a beer on a sunny day, which is happening more frequently now, I have days to sort of scratch the proverbial itch in that case. So that's something that I recommend personally. I know there's people that hear alcohol-free beer. What are you talking about? That's stupid. What's the point of beer without alcohol, bruv? Ooh, chin Stella. And each to their own. But I find that it's a suitable substitute for my previous desire to have a tin or a bottle of something midweek to sort of enjoy that and then not have to deal with any of the downsides. So if you'd like to give it a go, use the code ModernMind20 at checkout to do so, and there is a link in the show notes down below as well. So short answer is I very closely manage it. I'm very conscious of it. I will choose when I get it wrong. So there's no spontaneity like when I was a student. It's kind of a case of knowing 3 months in advance what social occasion I'm going to have more than 2 pints at, and it will probably then end up being 12 to 16 pints over the course of however many hours it is. But it's things like stag do's, it's things like big sevens tournaments or something that I've been going to for years, and all of my friends travel from all over the country to come to, and it's just a lot of fun. That's where I justify it. But where I don't justify it is to calm me down at the end of the night, or to unwind after a long day, or to manage stress, because I find that builds negative behavior patterns for me, and that's something I'm trying to avoid. So I'm not in any way demonizing booze. I don't think that, generally speaking, we should demonize booze as much as some corners of the internet do. You can make your own decisions, everything in moderation, monitor your behaviours with it, make decisions along those lines, and, referring back to something I said earlier, use your toolbox to make sensible decisions for what works best for you. Question from APA Performance. How many Munros have you climbed, and does high altitude climbing interest you? I have climbed 62, and high altitude climbing does interest me, but so does remaining alive. So it's definitely something I want to explore. I think I will get Mont Blanc and Elbrus done to assess whether it is fulfilling and life-changing as an experience enough for me to consider anything knocking on the door of 8,000ers. It's something I'd like to do at some point later in life, for sure. However, the statistics are not good. Odds, you can obviously beat odds with skill to some degree, but there's things that are out with your control on big boy mountains. And I have a lot of things that I would like to stick around for. And I don't yet have children, but I plan to and hope to. And I'm already fearful at the thought of my desire to keep pushing myself physically ever impacting future hypothetical children or Erin. And I think once I start looking at high altitude climbing as a thing of interest, that's where I start to blur the boundaries between ego and sensible decision making. So it's something I will continue to educate myself on, continue to move in circles that are up to speed on it. The camera guy that we worked with for Project Vertical from Fort William, for example, is now Nims Dye's video guy. He did a lot of the footage for the what's it called, Finding Michael, Saving Michael, the Spencer Matthews and Nims documentary recently. So he's very experienced. So I've got people I can turn to if I want advice. But Munros for now, I've got 220 of them left, and they're very beautiful, and they're on my home turf, and there is a much lower chance of me dying. So that's good, I guess. Hybrid Fitness Hub. What's the toughest physical event you have done? The 5-minute mile. So whether it was after a 500-pound squat or not, it doesn't really matter. It was. But whether it would have been easier had it not been is a hypothetical question. But we're not dealing in hypothetical questions. We're dealing in reality. And when I had about 120 meters to go, I genuinely thought that was me done. RPE 10, this is it. And I had to hang on for another 120 meters. And if anyone's ever seen the video, they'll know that I was hanging on. I was running like one man on letsrun.com forum said, a pregnant 85-year-old. And that was as a result of the fact that I was burst and managed to see a 4:58 mile over the line. But I was on the floor for half an hour, then got up and threw up. I had a headache that was unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It was just my body just going, no, I don't like it, for a while. And I've never really experienced that since. So physically that, from a psychological battle point of view, the double was obviously very tough, but I found I just got into a pretty steady rhythm with the double whereby I don't want to naively or ignorantly or arrogantly say, oh, could have kept going, easy, mate. Nothing like that. But I just felt like I got into a rhythm where if I just kept eating, kept to the rhythm, kept to the structures, there was more there. How much more, I don't know. Well, and we'll never know. I can say that with certainty. But the actual you have nothing left to give experience, 5-minute mile, was that. So there you are. Question from Ed Scott 1, who is a world-renowned freerunner, parkour athlete. Besides endurance sports, are there any other sports you enjoy watching? I enjoy watching all sports. I bloody love sports. I was fortunate enough to have parents that would just say yes to anything me and my brother wanted to try growing up. So I have played golf, skateboarded, played football, rugby, cricket my whole life. I've dabbled in tennis, squash, table tennis, snowboarding. I can still snowboard quite efficiently, to be fair. I have done water skiing, wakeboarding, just kind of, my parents have seen the value in sport. My dad was a professional cricketer. That's how he sort of built his career, through the network of professional cricket that then turned into the booze trade with beer. And I think he's always seen the value in sport. My mum's always seen the value in sport. So they were very, very supportive, sportive, kind of, pun, maybe? Don't know. With me and my brother growing up, where if we wanted to try something, they would be putting us in the car to go and try it. And I count myself very lucky for that, which means I've got a very keen interest in all sports. I've got a real admiration for all of the athletes at the top. I'm into F1. I'm into golf, but it's just different sports. I'm not that into watching football. I don't find it that thrilling, to be honest. American sports I find too commercial. I think the breaks between NFL and MLB is weird. It kind of ruins the flow of a game. I think the best sport on the planet, full stop, this is going to ruffle some feathers, is rugby. I think the character building that comes from it is phenomenal, especially in the UK where you're in -2 degrees, sort of longest yard, whoop, whoop, sort of session in the mud, but it's -2 rather than in a desert in somewhere in America. That sort of day out was very, very character building at 12, 13, 14 years old. I remember coming into changing rooms, not being able to do my top button up and having teachers shout at me because my hands were so cold, and then they wouldn't do it for me. And it was a weird cycle of anger and being told off when my hands weren't working, and I didn't know what to make of it. But I enjoy watching rugby. It's quite sad to see how rugby's going in the UK in terms of the Premiership side of things. I'm actually going to have some very interesting people on to talk about that very soon. But I love sport. I think sport's fantastic. Maybe a bit rude to say, I don't know, I don't want to offend anyone here, but I have generally found that people that have played sport growing up, obviously a fortunate position to be in, tend to have more malleable work ethics within a team setting, which is kind of a complex way of saying that they can be a bit more flexible within new and dynamic environments. God, that's a very corporate sentence. Good grief. Sounds like I'm writing a job description. Anyway, I think sport long story short, I think sport instills fantastic characteristics into individuals. It's something I'm going to encourage my kids to try, whatever sport they desire. And I think committing and sort of working towards the goals that come with sport at a young age carries you really well later in life. So I enjoy watching everything at every level because I'm just fascinated by the people playing it and the fans behind it, and just the community and the passion and the heritage and the storytelling and the business and the people behind sport is brilliant. And essentially, Ed, the answer to your question is yes, all of them, more or less, except football games that aren't really exciting. I kind of find day-to-day football games a bit not dull, but I feel a bit disengaged at points. But maybe that's because I gave football up at quite a young age, and it's just not something I've found as much familiarity with as I would with rugby, for example. So I mean no offence. Question from PB7251. Do you have any interest in track cycling? It'd be cool to see how your strength transfers over to a shorter, more explosive discipline of cycling. Yes, it's always been an interest. I've had a very fascinating conversation with Chris Hoy when I hosted him for something in Edinburgh about it, and he's given me a whole load of things to pursue in terms of avenues, maybe, but I haven't really committed the effort or time to make it happen yet, which is maybe quite telling in and of itself. It's always been I wonder how good I'd be at it, but it's something I'd like to give a go, but I'm obviously far too late on life to see whether it's something I'd actually be that good at on a competitive level. But I think it would be an interesting experiment to see if my lower body dominant power and fitness combination would translate well to a track. But having seen Robert Forsterman's quads, I think I'm a long way off from even really knocking on that door, to be honest. Question from J Baldwin 9886. First question, are you enjoying your work/life balance? Hope you've got a good stride and are waking up excited for your days. Currently, I'll be honest, no, I am not all the time, because there are a lot of things that I am doing that stop me from doing the things that I'm good at and stop me from doing the things that I enjoy that move myself forwards. And that is essentially a structural problem, something that we are currently fixing, but in fixing it is creating more work to fix. There's hires out at the moment, there's restructures that we're having internally, there's a new office on the cards, there's lots of things changing, which is all very exciting, but it means that there's things to keep on top of the day-to-day stuff that is eating into too much of my time to be able to focus on the things that I should be doing. So there's some days I'm waking up really excited, there's some days where I'm waking up a bit dreary at the sort of magnitude of the to-do list and the people that I forgot to get back to or whatever it might be. And I hold myself to very high standards, which means that recently I've felt like I've slipped a little bit in terms of my communications with some people, which I don't like and sort of irritates me. So I try and fix it. But realistically, at the moment, from a practical point of view, I can tolerate a lot of workload. I've sort of worked myself into a position where I enjoy a lot of what I do, which means that I'll happily, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, be doing things that contribute to quote-unquote work. And it won't all feel like it's not the sensation of, I don't know, filling in an Excel spreadsheet about stock counting for a business that isn't your stock. I don't know, bad example, but you know what I mean. It's not like I'm sat at a desk job that I don't enjoy all day, every day. There's variety in things going on, but there's lots of things that can be improved, and that's what I'm currently trying to improve. So I have accepted reality, which is I cannot currently cope with everything I am responsible to be dealing with, so we are taking action to try and fix that so that I can be freed up to do the things that I am good at and the things that I enjoy doing so that we can continue to move things forwards. Second question, brackets, cheeky. What's the best slice of pizza you've ever eaten? I had a slice recently that was the size of my head and cooked to absolute perfection. So I think they're actually out of business, but when Jamie and I went to the Movember Awards in 2020, was it 2020? Yes, it was. We were staying at my friend Thomas Carr's house afterwards, and we were pretty sauced. We were about 6 beers deep, I believe, which in my student days was just a leisurely afternoon, whereas now that would put me on my arse. And I had an overwhelming urge for pizza when we got home, so ordered one. Ordered it off Uber Eats or Deliveroo. I can't remember. I can't find record of it. But it arrived. I was so hungry I had a slice out on the road before we even got into the flat. And it was phenomenal. I don't know who it was from. I don't know what the place was called. I can't find record of the order. I've checked Jamie's phone. I even had some the day afterwards when I came back downstairs, not under the influence of alcohol. And probably could have maybe checked the pizza box and made a mental memory, but no. There was a pizza that I had in 2020, around February time, in a flat in Wandsworth that I ordered from somewhere in Fulham that was absolutely remarkable. And I believe, having had conversations like this one with somebody else, who is also a bit of a pizza connoisseur, they think that the place I'm talking about is since out of business, post-pandemic. Which is very sad to hear, hypothetically, if that is them. But maybe the unknown is what is making this so exciting to me. Maybe the unknown is what's making the memory so fond. Maybe the unknown is what's providing the flavour. And actually, maybe if I had the pizza again, it'd be bitterly disappointing. So I think I will take this memory to my deathbed as the pedestalised pizza that will never be again. Unless, by magic, one day, I find a way. So if there's ever a podcast titled Fergus Finds That Pizza, sorry headphone users, then you'll know that I've been successful. Anyway, probably spent too long on that question. Sorry everyone. But now you know that I bloody love pizza, and it's difficult not to. I've never met anyone that goes, oh yeah, I don't really like pizza, you know. So unless you're a bit of a weirdo, then I'm sure we all got a huge amount from that question just there. So, Joe Divine 3688, what is your marathon PR and do you have any plans to train to beat this in the future? My marathon PR is 3:17. It wasn't quite a full send, but I don't want to be stupid enough to say that I could have gone 10 minutes quicker or something, because I don't know. Had I been going 2% quicker the whole way, maybe I would have blown up. I don't know. So 3:17, and that was summer of 2020, I believe. And do I have any plans to train to beat this in the future? Yes, I will train to do a sub-3 marathon at some point. and it's just a case of deciding when that is and when it fits. And to be honest, with the direction that my goals are going this year, there's more than likely going to be a running bias, so it could well be this year, but who knows? Make sure that you're subscribed, and you'll find out. Ben Stallard 4542, how much restorative sleep do you aim for per night, and what has been the most significant factor in improving your sleep? Brackets, REM and deep. So I don't actually look at the specific timing around restorative sleep because I just find the variables are a little bit too difficult to keep on top of when I'm looking at just restorative sleep, so I kind of tend to just look at my sleep as a whole. So the most significant factors are going to bed and getting up at the same time consistently, not eating too late, not training too late, not showering before bed, and making sure that I'm suitably hydrated before bed. Those are the things that I found have the biggest impact, and those are the things that I try and do on a consistent basis. Doesn't mean I always get it right, doesn't mean it's always practical, but it means that when I feel terrible the day after or feel like I've not slept well, I can sort of work backwards and know why, which means that I don't need to sort of operate in the dark or the unknown. So I think that's what I really want to hammer home whenever I have conversations with people about sleep is look for the patterns, look for the things that you know influence you and how you feel, and then make decisions and structures accordingly. And that's what I found to be very useful. But I haven't got the data in front of me because I didn't exactly prepare for this question, but I have seen a big uptick in my REM and deep sleep on my Whoop when I have been doing all of those things that I mentioned. And then there's the sort of real 1%ers like sleep supplementation and the things that you can stack on top of that do make a small difference, but only if you've got the basics nailed. And I'll admit, recently I have not got the basics nailed. I've not been sleeping as much as I should. That's been making me more stressed. It's been making me more stretched. But at the moment, as I said earlier, I am holding my hands up and saying that in reality, I am not as streamlined as an individual as I would like to be in terms of my own workload and training load. That's something I'm trying to fix. I'm not glamorizing it. It's a position I'm trying to get myself out of so that I have a bit more freedom to do the things that I'm good at. But I am currently in a position where I am looking at the time left within the context of a day, and I am sometimes choosing to sacrifice sleep, which is not what I recommend, but there have been days when I've done it recently, and I'm sure there will be a couple of days where I choose to do it again soon before I find a solution to the ongoing systemic problem with how everything is currently structured. So hope that makes sense and isn't too deep and profound for all of you thinking, wow, I didn't expect just a deep dive into Fergus's personal structuring problems and time management with everything going on, but there you are. There you are. Josh_Adam7, will you ever compete in powerlifting again? Maybe. No plans to in the near future, but I do like lifting heavy weights and I do like metal music as I'm doing it, so there's no better place to do that than a powerlifting competition. So Joshua Swanapole 3119, what do you think of rowing as a hybrid sport in itself? Is rowing hybrid AF? Do you row, bro? No, rowing is a sport. Hybrid is the balancing of multiple sports. Therefore, no, it is not. It is rowing. Holmesley 22, any tips for rehabbing chronic back pain around SI joint? Again, ask a physio, not a stranger on the internet. On a podcast Q&A, something I'm always keen to hammer home in this industry is when it comes to injury management, there are specific qualifications and people to turn to, and I am not one of them. Josh_Adams_7, top tips for growing on YouTube. I am not the best person to ask this because if you look at the lifetime of my channel, the investment on my channel, the growth of my channel, the travel and people involved in my channel and things, I think logic says there should be more subs. But we've always focused on sort of integrity and authenticity, all fun buzzwords, Fergus, first and foremost, and sort of producing the content we want to produce. And that is maybe at the cost of doing more quote-unquote viral opportunities, trends, things like that. So the one constant I've had the whole way through with YouTube is one video a week and focus on the things that I enjoy doing and that I think will be interesting to share with others. So be ruthlessly consistent for 1 year and then start thinking about how to grow on YouTube. If you haven't done the year and haven't got that skin in the game, then this question's irrelevant, which I don't mean to sound critical. Josh, you know what? I can open your YouTube channel right here. 27 subscribers, 29 videos. Are they all shorts? Yes, they're all shorts. So shorts I have no experience in, not my game at all. But when it comes to long-form content on YouTube, do a year of a video every 2 weeks, whatever it is. Set your own schedule, but do it for a year, and then start asking the deeper questions around how you can optimize that. Because at the very least, along the way, you'll have improved your editing skills, you'll have improved your talking to camera skills, that will improve your eloquence and ability to hold a conversation. You will have dealt with some comments from people online that you've never met nor will ever meet, and they have anime profile pictures and weird usernames calling you a dickhead, and that will also build character. And you will maybe meet some people along the way. You'll maybe do some cool things. You'll maybe invest in some new kit. You'll maybe find out a little bit more about what you enjoy. You'll maybe become an absolute wizard on Photoshop. Who knows? That's the fun of it. So consistency wins all. And then my advice is actually to ask somebody else about top tips for growing on YouTube, because a channel of 70,000 subscribers, given how much time and effort we put into it, to be honest, if I'm going to be realistic, I'm probably not the person to ask. I think on paper, a YouTuber would expect more subscribers. So that doesn't mean that we're not going to keep doing what we're doing. We enjoy what we're doing and everything's working, but we are not too focused on the real nitty-gritty metrics of it, because then there's the risk of falling into the trap of only chasing trends and virality, and that can become a little bit less passion focused, a little bit more inauthentic, and that's where it can start to become more of a chore than it is a pleasure. And for now, YouTube is still a pleasure. Some weeks it can feel like more of a chore than others if ideas fall through or whatnot, but hopefully that illuminates things somewhat. So, PB7251, do you have any strength focused challenges coming up? Not definitely, but maybe. I'm pondering a lot at the moment, and they'll probably be lower body dominant again. There's a bench challenge and a running thing I want to do at some point, but when that'll be, I don't know. Kind of trying to map out the year at the moment and map out the next couple of years around ultimately very demanding day-to-day with the businesses. So I'm trying to be realistic about what is actually sensible and healthy for me to take on from a training point of view. If I can effectively offload some of my workload and free up some of my time for real long distance training again, then I might go down that direction. But right now I'm trying to be as sensible and practical about what's good for me and healthy for me and best for my mental health, alongside my actual physical performance in the short term, medium term, etc. Lindsay's 23. Do you get annoyed when people stop you? I've seen you in Edinburgh running, but don't want to interrupt your training. No, not at all. Please, by all means, say hello. I very much like engaging with people. I still find it absolutely surreal for, as I've just said, not that big a YouTube channel in the grand scheme of things, that people will see me places and say hello. I think it's fantastic, and I love meeting this community of people online in person. The only caveat I will add to that is if I'm obviously mid-training session, is I will probably not hang around. It might be a fist bump and a hello, what's your name, great to meet you, and off I go. But if I'm in the gym or I'm walking down the street and there's a clear opportunity that I'm not mad rushed or on the phone to somebody, then I would love to have a conversation with anybody that would like to have a conversation. Question from Nick Mac 92. How do you keep your garage warm enough for winter gym sessions? I don't. It's freezing. I have to wear hoodies, and sometimes I have to put my hoodie over my hands as I'm gripping a barbell, because the barbell is piercingly cold until it's warm enough for me to not have to do that. Sometimes I absolutely hate training in there in the winter because it's bad. It's bad. I mean, even right now it's still pretty chilly. So yeah, and in this economy, getting a portable heater in there just seems a bit reckless, really, to be honest. Chris Joe Scott, ever consider a cycling Everest attempt? Yes. Will I? Yes. When will I? We'll see. Question from Toby_Emmons. What guests/insights have caused the biggest change in your thinking/habits? Dr. Julie has helped me understand how I can better support those around me from a mental health point of view. Johan Hari helped me better understand how I could reconsider distraction and focus. And then on the flip side, Nirial sort of went in on Johan Hari from his perspective a little bit, and that helped me calibrate perspective on to-do lists and time management and where priorities should be. Alongside that, it's been amazing to talk to people like Dylan Hartley, who have insights that only come from being in that position of captaining England for so many years. And then I've had conversations with people like Roman Kemp, who have gone out of their way to really crusade for men's mental health. So to get insights like that, to then take into my own conversations with people on the topic and hear from somebody that's lost a friend to suicide is valuable for me, for my own understanding. And it's actually the most popular episode of all time. But Gaz Bamford It's titled How to Build a Special Forces Mindset. He was the Sergeant Major in the SBS for several years and is a close friend of Johnny and I's. And he's just very, very good at delivering information in a way that's clear to understand and clear to action in your day-to-day life. So I think, not the podcast specifically, but the time that I've spent with Gaz and the conversations I've had with Gaz over the years, he has probably caused the biggest change in my thinking and habits. Question from Sam Cornforth. Was Sam your best guest ever? Statistically, Sam, I'm addressing you directly. Yes, you are the best performing podcast episode I have ever had on The Modern Mind within the first 7 days. And as of tomorrow, the episode will be 7 days old. So you're kind of ahead of the curve before we've even hit the curve. So if that keeps your ego happy, great. What will probably bring it crashing down is the pain you felt in your legs after we ran a marathon together. So if you haven't yet seen that video, please do go and watch it. And you can all comment, Sam was your best guest ever, but oh my goodness, your legs must be wrecked. Or something to that effect. Okay, so the final question is an obvious one, and one that's quite simple in nature. And that is a question from Connor Mangum, 5021. So, what's next? What's coming up? I don't know exactly from a fitness training point of view, but what I know at the moment is that for the next month or two, there is a huge amount of exciting stuff going on that is all very formal business, long-term thinking focused, which is great. It's sort of high level, more stressful, more keeping you up at night stuff, which is exciting. But it means that I'm not in the right headspace for a few things that I had planned for this year, which means that I'm reassessing what's best within the whole ecosystem of everything I have going on and what I see that to become in the future. So there's some sort of clear decisions being made, there's some changes happening, there's some things that I'm probably going to change my mind on or sort of adjust given the way that the year's unfolding. But in short, I am currently trying to streamline all processes across everything. And that's not a small task. That involves other people. That involves finances, accounting. It involves time blocking. It involves training goals. It involves X, Y, Z. So that's the North Star for me at the moment. I don't really feel like I can go all in on something else until that is resolved. I will be doing a YouTube video once I've collected my thoughts properly on this, so do please keep an eye out for that. But until then, there are some shorter distance, faster, heavier things that I'm considering and I'm excited about and I'm starting to work towards. Dates to be confirmed, exact events to be confirmed, but I'm excited about them. So when they're announced, you will all be the first to know. And I'm not getting too far ahead of myself because I definitely feel that from a reality check point of view, there is work to be done now to open things up to move us forwards to then. So very, very fortunate to be in the position where these are the challenges that we're facing. So I just want to take a moment to thank you all for listening, engaging, being here, sharing with your friends, all of that stuff I really massively appreciate. And if you're still listening at this point in the podcast, you are a bloody legend. Thank you. And I am very excited to solve the problems that we are currently facing to just move things more and more into the future. The focus points are really community-driven, scale-driven, increasing the things that you can engage with, increasing the interaction that you can have, and looking to events, looking to increase cadence of things. And yeah, there's loads going on. I'm kind of only just scratching the surface, but my head's a bit of a jumble with all the things going on, but we are proactively trying to solve those. And I feel like this has almost become a bit of a therapy session for me today, that I've shared with you all of the challenges that I'm stressing about, trying not to catastrophize on or get too far down the rabbit hole on. And I don't want it to in any way sound like I'm being ungrateful or throw my toys out the pram or everything's so difficult, all this, all that, because I'm in this position because of my own doing. And it's a position I am very fortunate and very grateful to be in, but I'm having to be realistic about what can actually be achieved within the context of a week, a month, a day, and holding myself accountable to that reality, and thus taking action to delegate, solve problems, to move things forwards. So once again, thank you for listening. Do please make sure to hit the follow or subscribe button, share this episode or an episode previously with a friend, and sign up to the Modern Mind mailing list down below, as we will be building that out very soon. And I very much look forward to having you here next time. Thank you very much, and goodbye.